Hello,
And welcome to
Ancestry
with Lucy Luce.
and Lily Love. Welcome to our second episode.
As you may have noticed, we have changed our name. That's because we found that someone else had cultural connections, and we've decided on Ancestry, spelt like ancestry, but with story at the end.
Very clever, I'd say, and original.
Yes, so we don't have to step on anybody's toes.
No. Moving on.
Yeah, and today our episode is about Halloween and
Dia de los Muertos.
yeah, like we explained in our first episode, we're trying to find out more about our own cultures and other cultures in general, since this holiday is happening soon this week. We thought it would be fitting to learn more about it. Then we're going to tell you about it.
Yes, Lucy will be telling you the history of Halloween.
And then Lily is going to be telling the history of Dia de los Muertos.
Take it away, Lucy.
All right. So this book is called Death Makes a Holiday, A Cultural History of Halloween by David J. Scull. I got some information from there. An anthropologist, Margaret Mead, has a quote. It was the one night in the year when the child's world and the adult's world confronted each other, and children were granted to make mild revenge of the adults. The history of Halloween goes back 3,000 years, and I really suspect that it's probably more than that. Celtic people, I guess, the people of Ireland, these people were living in the Irish Sea. The festival that they would have is called Samhain, but it's spelled Samhain. Most people probably have heard of this. I feel like as more like people get more connected with culture, I've seen this word more just like in the past 2 years. I never heard of it before this year.
I've never heard of it either.
It actually translates to November, and it was like a transition time. It was when they would harvest fruits and vegetables that they had been planting for the year and getting ready for the winter. So since this is a time of everything's dying, you're preparing to go inside, and like basically all of nature is dying. You have the potential of dying if you don't get enough food for the winter or enough wood or whatever. Like you have to be preparing for not dying. They started doing rituals and festivals to kind of lighten the mood, but also celebrate the death that was happening. So that's where these, like the base of Halloween started, was with these festivals. Halloween is October 31st, if for anybody who doesn't know. This is like the transitioning period between like fall and almost coming to winter. They believed that the veil between our living world and the dead world was thinner during this time. So they believed that the dead walked among us. They would do things like put out treats into the woods and like away from their homes to kind of divert the spirits away from them. And that was also why they did like bonfires and like gatherings, so that it was kind of like trying to scare away the spirits but also honor them in a way. They also would thank the gods for their harvest. So there was like sacrificing of animals and like divination. They believed that during this time period, because the veil was thinner between the realms, they believed that they could predict the future better during this time period. Druids is the Celtic like priests. They would sacrifice animals.
They'd sacrifice animals
Yeah,
during this time?
they would sacrifice animals And then the druids would look at the intestines, and that's how they would tell the future.
Oh.
Don't ask me how. The Romans came and started doing their conquering and such. And with the Romans, they have a goddess, I think it's thought Pomona, and she was
Mm.
the goddess of apples and nuts, I guess. The tradition of bobbing for apples comes from how they how they brought together the Roman traditions with like the Samhain. So that was in like 50 BC. And then in the 4th century, there was a rise of Christianity. They would take pagan traditional ceremonies, and then they would just say, well, like put Jesus or put God on this. They would just take a tradition and then make it Christian. They also decided to take this pagan celebration and turn it into All Saints Day, which is November 1st.
Mm.
Or also, well, in their, I guess in Ireland, I guess is when this, like, or where it was happening, they called it All Hallows Day. So All Saints Day is they would recognize all the saints. So the Catholic saints that don't have a day, it became, since it was already about death and dying and commemorating people and like acknowledging that the dead are walking among us, they just took that and turned it into a celebration for the saints. Hallows Eve was the night before, since it was called All Hallows Day. So
Mm.
October 31st, the night before, became like the nighttime festival of celebrating. And a lot of people, children especially, would do tricky things. Children would do tricks or, mischievous things.
Mm.
And a few things that I've read talks about how I believe in the Celtic um, belief system, they thought that there were fairies or fairy folk, is what I read, that would steal babies and replace them with a changeling or goblins who were, the quote, old in wickedness while still in the cradle, possessing superhuman cunning.
Wow.
So, um, a lot of people think that this is why, or this is kind of how the trick or treater kind of and the mischievous child um, came to be kind of like a celebration of Halloween, was because it was kind of like the kids are pretending to be these changeling kind of little goblin children. And it kind of is like a night where you get to pretend like you're somebody else, and you can kind of like be mischievous, and you can do things that are a little taboo, go against the society
Oh,
norms.
so that's where like trick or treat came about, the
Yeah,
trick part.
yeah. Every culture has like this mischievous, like they let the kids kind of run wild. Kind of interesting.
Mhm.
They also, the Catholic Church made November 2nd All Souls Day, which just commemorated all of um, the dead. So I think that that's where like Dia de los Muertos probably comes from,
Yeah.
is it was, that just becomes like a South American tradition because they had Catholic people come over. But I'll let
Mhm.
you tell us more about that in a
Yeah,
second.
sure.
So in the 16th century, on Halloween 1517, that was when Martin Luther posted his Protestant paper on the Catholic Church said, we don't put up with Catholic stuff and we're protesting it. So a lot of people became Protestants, and because of that, kind of Halloween went away for a little bit. And then on November 5th, 1605, a guy named Guy Fawkes blew up the House of Lords. He was arrested and they cut him in pieces and burned his body. So he didn't actually blow it up. He tried to. And then he got caught before it happened. But then, yeah, they like
Punished
really
him.
killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah. The year after, and then continuously in England, they would have these really like ruckus filled like parades and festivals, and people just like looting and going crazy. This was November 5th. They would do this every year. So now it's become kind of like conjunction with uh, Halloween. They said that they would create like effigies of Guy Fawkes and then burn like the doll or whatever of him on a bonfire. They would like just kids go out in the street and just go crazy,
Yeah.
mischievous, breaking
Wow.
things, and yeah.
The party still continues, huh?
Yeah. So then when Protestants and Puritans came to the US to escape Catholicism, they didn't really want to bring those kind of traditions. So Halloween didn't come to the US until I think it was like the late 1700s. And Virginia was the first place in the US. It was like the birthplace of Halloween in America because they had a lot of Catholic people and people who believed in magic and witchcraft.
Mhm.
And so they started having more like of the Halloween kind of celebrations that we have today, um, with the bobbing for apples and bonfires and games. They would do like divination kind of fortune telling games. Oh, I watched this documentary called The Haunted History of Halloween by the History Channel. In this, they were talking about like the different kind of divination games, and one of them was like a girl would put her shirt or get her shirt wet and then hang it outside, and then her future husband would come in the middle of the night and move the sleeve. I don't really know. I don't understand. And then how do you know who he was? And
Yeah.
I don't
Wow.
know.
So
Um,
much too. Like it's so intricate, the history.
yeah,
There's just so much going on.
yeah, it's probably just the wind blowing the sleeve around. Not at all. And then you're sad because no one wanted to touch my wet shirt sleeve. I'll never get married. I don't know. Yeah. A lot of them seem to be like about who am I going to marry or
Mm.
stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Then the 1800s was when they started having play parties, which were pretty similar to like what our Halloween parties were, costumes and pumpkin carvings and games, and but it was more, I guess, more like high society kind of
Oh,
parties. What
I
the
see.
what the documentary looked like when they showed
Yeah.
pictures. It didn't look like a farm. Uh, like when I think of Halloween parties, I think of like a hoedown. I don't know why. Like I think because like I think of bonfires and bobbing for apples. It seems like a time to be outside doing stuff like with hay and pumpkins.
Yeah, and candy.
Yeah. In a lot of different um, cultures throughout history, they've had the children come to the houses of people for various reasons, and then people give them things. Usually, orphans would come around to houses and ask for alms, and then they would pray for the dead souls of that family.
Oh, that's
Um,
sweet.
yeah. And so, like, what we have come to know as Halloween really started because of um, the government realizing that kids are going to be mischievous, that this has always been a night of like mischief making.
Mhm.
In the early 1900s, kids were like vandalizing farms, um, like leaving gates open to let the animals out. Um,
Would they even
just
like egg the houses?
yeah, and like toilet paper.
TP the houses, yeah.
Yeah, there was I read in multiple places about kids would push over like outhouses
Yeah.
um when people were in them.
Oh my god.
Like that was a trick that they would do to people, and like set up things in the middle of the street to trip people, scare old ladies, like all the bad things the kids were
Yeah.
doing.
They went all out.
Yeah, so I guess it got really bad. So then I think it was around the 1930s was when the government and parents and magazines and everybody started kind of trying to promote having more indoor parties to get the kids to come inside, and like the churches started doing things
Wow.
and
So recent
started,
too.
yeah, so that got kids off the street, and then people started making costumes. It became more commercialized. People started, or not people, companies, I guess, owned by people, would they started making candies to give to the kids, and so it was really just to get the kids off of the street
Mm.
that like the Halloween that we know today
Wow.
is what it is, because yeah,
All because
they,
of children.
yeah.
Misbehaving.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
um yeah, it's really crazy that it's gone from like this celebration of death to like this just like mischievous night where, but it still has this like magical, like otherworldly kind of occult feeling. In that documentary in the History Channel DVD, they were talking about how we have this like all these decorations, like cut off feet that you just hang, outside your door, or a skull. It's like socially acceptable to
Mhm.
like put all these really grotesque, weird stuff up, just like show it to the world for a month or so.
Mhm.
But like if you were decorating your house like that any other time of the year, like your neighbors would be calling the cops on you.
Yeah, they would think there's something wrong upstairs.
Yeah. But it's like we just have this time now where it's like, here you can show how weird you are, but just now, and then pack it up, and then we'll go right to Christmas.
They give
um
us one holiday to be bad.
yeah, yeah, but I like how it's still like this about like death and darkness,
Yeah.
and I think that it's important for us like as people to kind of celebrate death and dying, because it's part of what happens to the world,
Mhm.
or the earth, that we can't escape, and it happens every year, so you have like it's good to embrace it rather than fight against it.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow.
It's so much.
Yeah. I'm sure you can go on forever with this one.
Yeah. So one thing that I guess I want to end on is the idea of trust. This whole holiday, like it's always been about trusting other people. But I mean, you go to people's doors and ask them for things, and then they just hand you candy or treats, and then you just trust that they're going to give that to you, or what they're saying that they're going to give you.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
at the same time, like, we're trusting that the earth has us as
Hmm.
well,
Yeah,
because I
definitely.
mean, we're going into this time when, I mean, nowadays we have houses that have air conditioning and heating, and we can go to the grocery store. We don't have to try to worry so much about, are we going to have enough food and warmth to last until the spring comes.
Yeah.
Being able to carry on traditions like this helps us to connect to the earth and realize that it's always been like this,
Mhm.
and we will get through
Well, that's a lovely ending
it.
to all that spooky stuff.
Yeah. All right.
Wow.
So you tell us about Dia de los Muertos.
Yes, the history behind it. It's crazy because while you were talking, there are a lot of similarities between these two holidays. And ironically, people actually mistake it for Mexican Halloween.
Mhm.
But I mean, I guess there's more significance to it than that. Same as Halloween, Dia de los Muertos is an ever evolving holiday. And it was actually, it's traced back to the earliest roots of the Aztec people,
Oh
which
wow.
is now central Mexico. And it's, as you said, also 3,000 years old. So when the Aztecs celebrated it, they would use skulls to honor the deceased, their loved ones. And with that, upon dying, the souls would have to travel through the land of the dead. And it's said that they would have to travel through 9 different realms. And so that's where the whole tradition came about of family members leaving offerings such as food, water, tools for this long journey because it was a course of several years to complete.
Wow.
But once they completed, they were able to reach their final resting place. It was originally celebrated at the end of August, but when the Spaniards came and took over, they moved it to November 1st, November 2nd, the Catholic tradition of All Souls Day and All Saints Day. And the Mexicans actually celebrate, or the Aztecs, or what have you, the same thing. They
Mhm.
would celebrate Dia de los Inocentes, which is the first day is dedicated to just the children who have passed away. And then Dia de los Muertos, All Souls Day, is dedicated to all the other souls who passed. So I thought that's pretty, heartwarming that they have a day for the children and have a day for all the other souls. What inspired it, they were able to kind of keep their tradition. It was just moved to a different day. That's when they started setting up the altars or the ofrendas, either on grave sites or they would do it in their homes, and they would decorate it with, candles and flowers, especially the marigold flowers, which I have here. I actually made these by hand. I didn't want to get the real
They're so
ones.
beautiful.
Thank you. Made out of tissue paper. Because they were using marigold, it's such a bright orange. They would pick the petals of the flowers and leave like a long trail to lead up to the altar so that it pretty much guides their loved ones home,
Mm.
along with the candles. And then they put the offerings can include anything from like their favorite toy, their favorite things to do, pictures of the deceased, and of course, food and drinks. And the food can range in anywhere between fruit, such as like bananas, apples, oranges, to pan dulce, which is sweet bread. And there's also a famous bread made specifically for Day of the Dead. It's called pan de los muertos. And I think it's similar to what you were mentioning about the souls bread, or I'm not sure what you
Mhm.
mentioned, but I think it's very similar to that. It's actually like a bun, and then they like make out of dough these little bones and like cross the bones on top and then sprinkle it with sugar and bake it, and
Mm. That
another
sounds
form of
cute.
pan dulce. Yeah, very good. And then,
And what are they called?
well, there's
It's
pan
just
dulce and then the pan de los muertos.
okay. Bread of the
And
dead.
yeah, exactly.
And
And
that's the
it
one with the
can,
bone.
yeah, that's the one with the bone on top. It's like a cross bone. And then the other ones are, I have some here on my altar, the sweetbreads. They're called conchas as well because they look like seashells.
Hmm.
And they come in chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. But the food can range also to tamales, tortillas, and then they put their favorite beverages. It could be Coca-Cola, or it could be tequila, it could be a beer, it could be a cup of coffee, or Mexican hot chocolate, which is basically a spiced hot chocolate. They'll leave water, mineral water, and there's also a corn-based drink that they would leave called atole. So it's like a sweet drink made out of corn.
Isn't it cinnamon or is it chocolate?
It can be flavored either cinnamon or chocolate, but it's definitely made out of corn. You mentioned how during Halloween, the veil of the
Mm-hmm.
spirit world and the living world is very thin. They believe that during Dia de los Muertos, that border between the spirit world and the living world is dissolved. And that's how the deceased are able to reunite with their families and have a big feast. They have music, there's dancing, there's, you know, just a big celebration where
Mm-hmm.
they get to celebrate with their loved ones and honor their loved ones one more time. Like you mentioned, I also think it's very important to honor those who have passed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool that we do have holidays that allow us to do that. And I mean, who knows? Maybe the veil is thin and they do come back and are with us. We just don't know it yet. But as long as you feel their energy, tell
Mm-hmm.
stories about them, have their picture up, there's no doubt that they're definitely there with you at that time.
Yeah, I feel like you just giving the energy to their existence is in that in itself just the act is bringing them back,
Exactly.
at least in your heart.
Definitely. Absolutely. And just having a big celebration for them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what better way to celebrate them as if they're still here? I mean, I'm sure they are still here, just in a different realm and
Mm-hmm.
not a physical realm, but definitely the energy is there. There's also, I mean, one of the most prominent things for Dia de los Muertos is the skeleton, the skull that represents the dead. So I did my makeup like representing the spirit world, representing the living world, half and half. There's this really cool um, art piece, very famous, and it's from 1910. It was by artist Jose Guadalupe Posada, and it's called the La Calavera Catrina. And it was basically a painting depicting or mocking really the wealthy and commenting on revolutionary politics. And it's what the art piece is a woman, a skeleton woman, and she's got big earrings on, she's got a big fancy hat on, fancy clothes on. And he did it to not only mock, the rich and the wealthy and the politicians, but to also mock the Mexicans who abandoned their heritage and their traditions to adopt the European fashion and kind of become more like them.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's a really powerful statement though, because it shows that it doesn't matter how fancy your clothes on, or it doesn't matter how fancy your clothes are, it doesn't matter how much money you have. In the end, we're all going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, we're all skeletons. We're all the same. So I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah.
And La Calavera Catrina is one of the most iconic, recognizable figures in Dia de los Muertos. You see women every year dress up as her. They have the elaborate headpieces with the flowers and this, like, they have these spikes, which are, I think, representing like auras. They have these huge, beautiful, elaborate dresses. They do full blown sugar skull makeup, and they have they yeah, that's one of the most iconic images today just from that painting trying to make a political statement.
Mhm.
And even though it's an ever evolving holiday, it wasn't until like, I want to say like this past decade where it became even more and more prominent here in the States and everywhere else, where they would really celebrate it. They would have parades, they would have, everybody paints their face. I did it with my family every year, painting our face, going to a parade. We're doing it again this year.
Mhm.
One of the biggest celebrations for Dia de los Muertos here where I'm from is held at Hollywood Cemetery. And I was fortunate enough to go right before the pandemic hit. They decorate the graves absolutely incredible. And they have like competitions on who's the best altar,
Oh, wow.
most traditional, most elaborate. They were the most breathtaking ofrendas I have ever seen in my life. Like pyramids or huge books, the lights, so many marigold flowers I've ever seen, pictures of so many deceased loved ones. They had all the food out for them, all the drinks. Every different gravesite or ofrenda had like music playing, their favorite, well, I'm sure it was their loved one's favorite music.
Mm,
Very beautiful.
wow.
I'm so glad I got to witness that and see and realize like, wow, like these are my roots. Like this is where I come from, and these are my family's traditions. So I thought that was really cool. And that's basically the gist of Dia de los Muertos. It's not as elaborate as Halloween, but it does have such a significance of honoring those who have passed and,
Mhm.
you know, putting out their favorite things like they're still here and celebrating them one more time, just like one day out of the year, which I'm sure they can be celebrated all year long, but to really like go out and have a specific holiday for their loved ones, I think is really cool. And
Mhm.
if you want to wish somebody a happy day of the day, you say Feliz de Dia de los Muertos. And
Bonita.
qué linda. I made my altar this year honoring three special souls. I always honor my one of my favorite icons, Selena Quintanilla Perez. She's a very well-known Mexican American Latin artist, and for her offering, I put on. She used to wear these really beautiful, elaborate belts with her outfits, and so I put one with moons on it because Selena, her name is supposed to mean goddess of the moon. And then my kidney donor, who was a 3-year-old named Wesley, is also up here. His offering is a little sloth there. So it was one of his favorite things was a sloth. And my Nana, who also passed away this year, unfortunately, her offering was her favorite coffee mug. She was always drinking a cup of coffee, didn't matter what day or time it was. And I filled it with the famous and well-known Mexican hot chocolates,
Mm.
very like spiced chocolates.
Mm.
They smell so good. Yeah, I put 3 of them for each of the souls. I have my candles here. I have an incense I wanted to light just to like set the mood kind of thing. And this is frankincense and myrrh. And I also left pan dulce for each of them, chocolate, a strawberry, and a vanilla. And then there's also like a cup of mineral water here for them, which I usually change every day. And it's a tequila cup from Guadalajara, which is where my family's from. So it's a lot of like significance and, it's very traditional, very, I think
Ritualistic.
definitely. And it was fun. I made these by hand and had a blast doing them and would remember them playing Selena's music, like remembering my Nana and all the funny things she would do. And then luckily I know a lot about my donor and when, I wrote a song for him. So it's nice to be able to uh, honor them
Mhm.
and how significant they were in my life, definitely. From up to how I celebrate to up to how other people celebrate. It's just really, I think it's such a beautiful holiday. And it was fun being able to do the research behind it and know where it comes from and why it came about and the changes it's gone through.
Mhm.
And you can find all this information regarding the history of Dia de los Muertos on history.com.
They have all the history that you could
Yeah,
ever want.
exactly. Movies and websites.
um, so what were they doing like with the Mayans? How did they celebrate? Were they murdering people? I always, I don't know. No, not Mayans. I mean
Oh, the
Aztecs.
Aztecs. No, they weren't murdering people. They would just like,
Or sacrificing is what I really meant.
I think they would sacrifice them. I don't think they would do it on Day of the Dead because that's not anything I read during my research. But I believe they would sacrifice people who like did bad or who wanted to sacrifice them to their gods. Maybe some people volunteered, maybe they were chosen specifically. But in my research, I didn't read anywhere that they would sacrifice the dead, and that's how the Day of the Dead came about.
Mhm.
It's just more honoring their loved ones who have passed, and it says they would honor them with skulls. I'm not sure if it's the skulls of their deceased, but um, it was a very um, more like significant rather than brutal
Mhm.
history that I was looking upon. And I've read several articles, and they were all mentioning the same thing. And it seemed very uh, simple from what I was reading because it's such a short history about it, but it's so weird how it goes back the same amount as Halloween, like 3,000 years. But the tradition itself seems to have remained the same,
Mhm.
honoring them, leaving them food and tools, and for that long spiritual journey to get to their final resting place.
Mhm.
So I think it's more about like family rather than sacrificing,
Yeah.
which I'm happy about.
Yeah.
No animal sacrificing here that I found.
Oh, that's good. Or human. That's even
Yeah,
worse.
at, and not on this holiday at least that I've read. But yeah, it just makes me, just talking about it makes me so hungry. Like I'm gonna take my own journey to the refrigerator and make myself. It's really cool though that there are some parallels to the Halloween tradition and the Dia de los Muertos tradition.
Well, I think Christianity helped with that. Like how
Yeah.
you said that they switched it, like, because the Spaniards came over and they already had kind of like the Halloween traditions switched
Hmm.
over to Catholic. So that
Exactly.
was probably why they were like, oh, you already have this kind of ceremony that goes with being
Exactly.
acknowledging the dead people, then
Yeah. I
let's just squish them together and
yeah,
call it Catholicism.
exactly. Let's call it even. Yeah, that's actually what I read too, that although they took over and everything, they actually thought this tradition of theirs celebrating August was so beautiful. They there was one thing they didn't want to like take away from them, so they moved it to like, okay, well, you can have it on our day kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So that was kind of cool of them.
I guess.
Like, kind of. Keyword.
At least they gave it. I mean, like, they didn't just be like, no, heathens, you
Exactly.
can't do this because
Yeah,
it's
you have to
not.
do it our way. But I
Yeah.
feel like they let them keep it because they celebrated in a similar manner. They honored the dead with wine and
Mhm.
food and music. And so they saw the parallels and were like, okay, yeah, you guys can keep your holiday. That's fine. But we can have everything else. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. It's very interesting to, I love learning about holidays and like the history behind it and why we do what we do because like nowadays it just feels like everything's so commercialized and then like
mhm,
why are we doing this?
exactly. Nobody stops and asks that. Like, why?
Yeah, like
Where did this
why,
come from?
yeah, why are there kids dressed in costumes roaming the streets and asking strangers for candy?
Little do they know they convinced the government to let them have a day so they don't ruin everything.
Yeah,
Wow, kids are powerful.
yeah.
Oh,
Halloween's been a fucked up uh holiday from like the beginning.
Yeah, it
It's
seems
just,
pretty gnarly.
yeah, it's just like really just a night of just let go of
Chaos
your
and havoc and
inhibitions. Yeah.
yeah, a chance to be
For
bad.
yeah. So Halloween and Dia de los Muertos in this time of transition, it and the thinning of the veil is a time where you have to believe in some kind of spirituality or the occult or just a spirit world in general and the magic of it all. Embracing your fears, but then realizing that they are okay and they're normal and we all deal with them. The Halloween time shows us that there are fears of the otherworldly, but also fears of each other as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But these are all normal human fears, kind of making it enjoyable so that we can move into the next season, which is more light and love. Like Christmas time becomes like this, like a whole other kind of magic
Yeah.
and embracing like peace and family and
And
love.
giving instead of taking.
Yeah, so like right now in this time, it's okay to be afraid of the unknown. We would love to hear about how your family or your culture celebrates this time of year, whether it be Halloween or de los Muertos, or do you celebrate some kind of Samhain, if that's even how you pronounce it? Or do you celebrate All Hallows Day? Do people still only celebrate the Catholic holidays?
Hmm.
And if you celebrate it religiously, how do you do that?
But also to we want to encourage you to dive in and do your own research about if these subjects interest you in any way. You can obviously go through the internet and get lost in a portal of history. Go to your local library, check out some books on the subjects that
Or
fascinate you.
DVDs, the books and resources I got for my research today, I got from the library, my local library.
Hmm. And
Um,
everybody has streaming services. So
yeah, Amazon Prime has surprisingly good random documentaries.
if you liked this episode, just be sure to stay tuned for more episodes coming up.
Please send in any of your ancestries.
We do have our own email. You can reach out to us at lucyloosellilylove@gmail.com.
That's LucyLuzLillyLove at gmail.com.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.
Yes, and please like and
Subscribe.
subscribe.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
And, and feliz del Día de los Muertos.